another exciting edition of Law and You, and we are still on succession in estate planning. That's what we are all about again on today's episode, and looking at what it comprises in terms of structuring and managing one's assets while he is alive or she is alive, and when one is gone, there's need to also, carry out measures in order to deploy, these measures to carry out the wishes of the testator when he or she eventually dies. But will it be indifferent for me to say when you eventually die? I think it's quite a difficult task when we hit the words directly by saying that it is important that you prepare, to carry out measures in which your wishes can be carried out by the time you are gone. I mean, by the time your demise is announced. Well, it's quite what we must eventually, deal with in one's lifetime, except our Creator, decide to do the otherwise, which for now, mortality still has not been given. They granted the powers to be turned into immortality as long as living on earth here is concerned. My name is Philip Omo Gyukmo, and discussing this with me, as we've always had in the series of Succession in Estate Planning, is a seasoned legal practitioner, Akigbe Oseo. Thanks for coming.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Philip.
Oh, well, I think it's quite somehow, burdensome, somehow, scary when you talk about making plans for a while in your lifetime on how your wishes can be carried out when you eventually die, or when one eventually dies. So why is it a hard nut to crack, and how can you bring succor in the direction of people who will turn out to be potential testators or eventual testators to all of this, in order to clear the shady areas of not necessarily making them feel like they are announcing their death or demise as a result of making such plans?
Okay, of course, because of the traditional understanding we have, and then our spiritual inclinations, people naturally will not like to talk about death, right? Because they feel that death is not their portion. Death is seen as something negative. But that's fine. But it becomes even worse when death comes and the person is not able to rest in peace because of the many issues that would have plagued his demise, or plagued that would have come about as a result of his demise. So, but you see, but looking at it from the spiritual perspective, death is not an end. It is the beginning of another life, as it were.
Of course, yes.
So if we have an understanding of what death is, then it will kind of change our mindset.
Of course.
So if you want to go to heaven, inevitably death must occur. But you see, Jesus lived for 30-something years. It's not about the length of time that one exists on the face of the earth. It is the quality of life that individual lived, and the legacies he is able to leave behind.
Okay, I think we can also put it on the flip side, that it's not by one's duration, but by one's donation to life.
Of course.
Well, I brought that in, for you to come in to say that in that light, because of this whole aspect of the fact that we've dealt substantially with wills, and we've also dealt substantially with trusts. Now, let's look at other legacies by which beneficiaries can also, come in terms of having documents, that will also help for them to acquire these properties from their parents or from the testator. Now, there's a very big challenge when it comes to, investing or seeing that the beneficiaries have the invested capacity, to carry on the legacies of the testators. Aren't you about that?
Yes. So, we've been talking about a man acquiring assets in his lifetime and then transferring those assets to named beneficiaries.
Yeah.
But you see, beyond the acquisition of assets and all the options we have stated as being necessary for estate planning,
Yeah.
one major necessary step that must be taken is the fact that it is not what you leave for your children that counts. It is what you leave in them.
In them.
Yes. So I'll say that again. We are more concerned about leaving things for our children. But the question we should ask ourselves is, what have we left behind in our children?
Okay.
What are those standards, those ethics, those behavioral
That we've
patterns
inculcated in
that
them.
we've inculcated in them? Because you can sweat yourself out, build a mansion, and leave it behind for a child who will use the proceeds of that building
Like
to
a prodigal son.
Yeah, to take and he wastes the property. And mind you, when the man was alive, he would not dare get himself involved in certain excesses.
Yeah.
And then why did he do that? He did that so that he could he could leave a legacy behind for his son or daughter. And then the moment the child steps in, he either sells the property, wastes the property, and does whatever he likes. Why? Because the father was more interested in keeping wealth than in inculcating character.
Inculcating character.
And you see, you may have competence and not character, or you may have character and not competence.
Okay.
If you have competence and not character, it's a disaster. If you have character and not competence, you may eventually be able to develop competence.
Okay.
But if character is lacking, then it's a disaster. So my take
Character
on,
is the denominating factor.
of course, is the foundation.
Foundation.
It's the basis, you know. So whilst we are spending time thinking of what to leave behind for our children so that they do not go through the issues we went through growing up,
Yeah.
also remember that what you leave in them is more important than what you leave for them.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I'll give an instance. 3 very distinguished senior advocates, lawyers, you know, eminent personalities, but for obvious reasons, I will not call names.
All right.
A very distinguished senior advocate had about four sons or thereabout, 1 wife. So it wasn't an issue of
Polygamy.
Polygamy. No, the same woman. And then the man died, had assets scattered around, and you know the children decided to share. Mind you, this senior advocate, his eldest son, eventually became a senior advocate.
Oh.
I think one of the children amongst the 4 also became a judge. So these are people who are learned.
Who are learned.
And so their father, they couldn't find a will written by their father. So they came together and said, okay, let's just, you know, share. And so while the sharing was done, they discovered what is called a holographic will.
Oh.
A handwritten will.
Will.
That, you know, it didn't really go through the normal process of writing a will.
Yeah.
But he just scribbled something down.
Yeah.
That document was what took the children from the High Court up to the Supreme Court.
All right.
In fact, their father was so respected that the judges who heard the cases
Yeah.
were reluctant to even consider the cases because their father was an enigma.
Wow.
And so when they got to the Supreme Court said, you know what, you guys just go back home and settle. We cannot give judgment. This man is, he's larger than life. We can't be sitting here deciding a case over his children. What is the point I'm making? They fought over the man's property up to the Supreme Court. Now, the point is, if there was that cohesion, if there was an understanding within the family, beyond a will or any document or any estate plan, that should have, you know, kept them together.
Yes. Bind them together.
Of course. Now, I tell you of another very respected senior advocate who has a law reporting establishment. In his lifetime, he decided to create a trust and, placed that law reporting establishment under a trust. When he died, his eldest son went in and said, you know what, I'm the eldest son, give it to me. To hell with my siblings. And they told him, you can't have it, because the trust is distinct from the estate of the settlor. And so that passed. These are, respected people.
Yeah.
Now, a third senior advocate in Benin had just 3 sons, and in his lifetime, he identified his assets, and he passed on. They didn't find any will prior to his death. And so because there was an understanding amongst the children, they already knew who their father was, what he stood for, what he would have done
when
in
he
his
was
lifetime.
Yeah.
They distributed the assets amongst themselves.
Amicably.
When eventually they found or discovered that he wrote a will.
Contrary?
No.
Okay.
They discovered that what they had even done
was in tandem
with the content of the document.
Awesome.
That simply meant that the old man had inculcated character in his children, such that when he is not seated as the enigma he was in his lifetime, the children already would be asking themselves the question, what would daddy do in the circumstance? Because they could tell that daddy was forthright, daddy had integrity, daddy knew what he was doing.
Yeah.
This was what he stood for. So it's a challenge to parents beyond going to their lawyers or writing wills and all of that, to have a clear pathway.
Yeah.
Such that he's not a two-faced figure, where today we see him as a saint, tomorrow we see him as a different person entirely.
Okay.
So I needed to give that background to say that.
And these are really wonderful examples that you just
living examples.
Living examples.
I'm careful not to mention names, living examples.
But again, can we call that like a stroke of luck or blessing, as regards the latter you just mentioned concerning building character, in the children, which is more important than even giving them, assets to manage, most especially when it involves, having character. It gives them a huge opportunity to be able to, continue the legacies of their fathers. Now, a situation where a man is in the process of doing that in his lifetime, building character in the children. What about in situations where there may be, a Judah among the 12,
of
or
course,
among the Lot?
Of course, there will be a Judah.
So because that's why I said that was a stroke of luck or blessing. And the otherwise, how can that be managed?
No, but you see, I think that in every 12 there will be a Judas. That's what they say.
That's what they say.
So, but you can't, because you see, and I must balance it out. When it comes to assets, property, people change. When it comes to material wealth, people
of course,
change.
yes, yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is, ensure you do your best, do your part
in building character.
Let it be that you did everything that ought to be done. I'll give you instances. Growing up as a child, you come back home with a sharpener or a pencil or a biro that my father knew was not part of my pack before I went to school. I will explain how that thing got into my bag.
Of course, yes.
Who owns it? Why did I take it? And and he will ensure that it is returned. Today we live in a system where everybody is saying, my child is wealthy, my child is wealthy. And you are not asking that child, what is the source of your wealth?
What is the source of wealth?
And the child, in return, he knows that his father is a big man. But that child does not know, what does my father do? What has he done to make him deserve this amount of wealth he's bandying around? So when you have those questions that cannot be answered, you are actually raising another generation that will be worse than the father. And it creates a problem. So when the man dies, of course, the children will jostle for his assets.
Of course, yes.
Because he has taught them to make money without working. When we work, when we display wealth without showing any iota of labor to justify the wealth we have, it creates a problem. And so when the man dies, inevitably, somebody will want to step in, one of his children will want to step in to also take over.
Okay.
So, but if we spend our time to build character in our children, when the inevitable occurs, like the Bible says, you train up a child the way he should go, when he is old, he will not depart from it. He will remember the standards that his father had set, in his lifetime.
I quite admire your examples, but again, let's look at other aspects where even the wives, for instance, the women involved, who probably may have to, find their way through to make their husbands, leave a deed or gift for them, at the detriment of the other children. Now, again, this is another challenge where a woman is involved and that has an ulterior motive, towards, for personal aggrandizement or taking over the testator's property. How can the man build character in the wife in that regard?
Well,
or how can that be managed if it happens that the wife seems to be in that toga of working towards personally taking over the property of the testator?
That's why we call it estate planning. It's something you need to sit down and make a deliberate decision about. It's planning. And you see, in the process of planning, you're going to ask yourself several questions. You're going to review certain things that certain persons had done in the past. And you're going to ask yourself the very important question that when I am no more here, what will likely happen? You see, there is nothing, when the man dies and all these bickering starts, all of that, they had their little expressions in the lifetime of the deceased. Nothing new. There's nothing new about their character. He knew about all of that. He knew that there was this woman somewhere, or his wife, that is materialistic and that she's going to cause a lot of mayhem when he knew. He knew there's this child that is laid back, that may not be interested in the assets. He knew that there's this particular child that if I give this property to, he will squander. He knew. So that's why it's called planning.
Okay, but sometimes this whole aspect of love, seem to make a man, to be flooded with, his thoughts be flooded with some thoughts that are not sensible, or that will also affect his ability to make the right plan, on how his wishes will be carried out, or on how his estate will be managed, even when he leaves or after his demise. So what advice do you give in respect of situations where a man seems handicapped as a result of love?
It is that love, part of the reasons why you have their names in our law books as examples of men who were reputable but failed to craft a proper estate plan. It is that love or lack of sensibility that puts them that put their names in those books.
So discipline is important.
Discipline is important. So I'll give you an example. A man, out of love, in quote, purchases properties in the name of his wife.
Wow.
At common law, for example, English law, it is the man that has the sole responsibility of providing for his wife. So if a man purchases property in the name of his wife, it creates a presumption that he intended to gift the property to the wife.
Okay.
Except he's able to establish by evidence that I did not intend to give it to you. So if he purchases property in the name of his wife, he has indirectly gifted that property to her.
Wow. That's by common law.
Yes, all in the name of love. Yeah, right. So, but the flip side is, if a woman purchases property in the name of her husband, that does not create any presumption, any iota of presumption that she intended to gift it to him, because at common law, she doesn't have the responsibility to provide for him.
the husband.
On the contrary, he has the responsibility to provide for her.
Yeah.
What is love all about when you are talking about intentions? What are your intentions? And don't get me wrong, I believe in love. I believe that women should be respected. I believe that if a man says that this is my better half, she should be adequately catered for. She should be taken care of. Those words are sacred.
Yeah, of course.
Right? But that does not take our sensibilities away. Such that you know that this woman will do X, Y, Z when the inevitable occurs. And for the men, I would just say this, that you find instances where the man has children out of wedlock, either before he got married to the woman in the house or after.
All right.
And then you find him trying to, because he may be a person to be reckoned with in society, and so he's trying to cover his tracks and doing all that. But you see, one day the bubble will burst. And when the bubble bursts, the bubble will normally burst when he's gone.
Yeah.
And then you see his name everywhere. And then one young man from somewhere is going to emerge. That young man is a spitting resemblance of the man. How would you say this child was not the product of a union between the father and the mother? The point I'm trying to make is this: lay it bare, make it clear. That, you see, it's this quest for trying to play holy that leads men, as the men, into these issues. Lay it bare. You have caused the problem. You face the consequences of your actions.
All right. Thank you very much, Akigbe Osero. And we're all about succession in estate planning. And we've had various topics on this, and we seem to also be looking at it so that we can have a total package for it. And discussing this is quite important, and also your responses are really quite valued. And we expect that you pouch your responses to us as questions or as contributions in the conversation. All you just need to do is to pouch it via the number riding on the screen, which is a WhatsApp number. And of course, it also doubles as a text line where you can also pouch your short message. We're going to get it. And as we wrap up, let's look at the aspect where danger poses when a man fails to plan, in terms of not having, a document like a will or a trust, or as the case may be. We're supposed to look into the aspect of the deeds of gifts and other legacies, but I think that will be followed through our subsequent editions. So what's your advice? What's your remarks in this regard?
Okay, a deed of gift is another very beautiful way of disposition of assets.
Yeah.
Now, so what's a deed of gift? Of course, there is this child. You want him to have a certain property.
Yeah.
You prepare a deed of gift and effectively transfer the property to the child. You see, when that happens, if there are no conditions in the document, it is irrevocable.
So it's quite important for one to plan,
yes,
ahead in terms of having a document like the will, like the trust, also the deeds,
deed of gift,
and deeds of gift, and there are other legacies,
of course,
which time may not permit us to really, rub our minds on. But I think we're going to be doing that in subsequent editions. So,
yes.
In 1 minute, what are your closing remarks?
We've said it over and over again, right? And for the purpose of this particular edition, of course, leaving assets, properties for children is very good. But leaving virtues, standards, ethics in those children is much more important. Because if you leave the children to their devices and they grow up being taught by people in the streets, by hoodlums, when the inevitable occurs, those children will dissipate those assets. And the wishes of the testator will never see the light of day.
All right.
So put something in them
Thank you
rather
so
than
much.
leaving something for
Thank
them.
you so much. Like the Englishman would say, make hay while the sun shines. And so it's up to you to do the needful now that you are alive, so that you don't make the mistake of putting your family in a chaotic moment when you are gone. This is where we call it a wrap on today's episode. Join us same time next week. From Philip Omo Gupo. Do a beautiful day ahead.